Dragon Ball GT is one of the most controversial entries in anime history, and even decades after its release, fans still can't agree on what it truly is. Some people consider it a misunderstood continuation of Dragon Ball Z that experimented with new ideas and themes. Others see it as a complete misstep that failed to capture the spirit of the original series, and many viewers don't even consider it part of the official Dragon Ball canon at all. But the real question is not whether GT is good or bad. The real question is something deeper. Was Dragon Ball GT actually a failure? Or was it simply trying to tell a different kind of Dragon Ball story that fans weren't ready for at the time? Because once you look past the criticism, GT reveals a story about consequences, legacy, and what happens when the tools of salvation begin to create more destruction than they prevent. Dragon Ball GT begins in a way that immediately surpasses the audience. Instead of introducing a new villain or escalating to another world-ending battle, the series opens by completely changing its main character. Goku, the strongest fighter in the universe, is suddenly turned back into a child. This one decision instantly shifts the entire tone of the series, and it raises an important question that the story never fully lets go of. What happens when the strongest warrior in history is forced to start over from the beginning? And more importantly, what kind of story does Dragon Ball become when the power is no longer the center of attention? Dragon Ball GT first aired in 1996, immediately following the conclusion of Dragon Ball Z. Unlike its predecessor, however, GT was not adapted from a manga written by Akira Toriyama. Instead, it was produced by Toei Animation as its original continuation of the franchise, which only limited creative input from Toriyama himself. This means that GT was not built on a long-term narrative foundation like Dragon Ball Z was. Instead, it was an attempt to extend one of the most successful anime franchises in history in a completely new direction. Because of that, GT often feels different in tone, pacing, and structure, almost as if it's experimenting with what Dragon Ball could have been if it moved away from its established formula. The story begins with Emperor Pilaf, a familiar character from the early Dragon Ball, finally achieves what he's always wanted, access to the Dragon Balls once again. However, this time, he does not use the Earth's Dragon Balls. Instead, he uses the Black Star Dragon Balls, a far more dangerous set of artifacts scattered across the universe. In the moment of misfortune, Pilaf makes a wish that unintentionally transforms Goku back into a child. At first, it seems like a harmless and even nostalgic change, almost as if the series is returning to its roots. But this transformation carries a hidden consequences that immediately raises the stakes. The Black Star Dragon Balls scatter across the universe after being used, and if they are not gathered within 1 year, Earth will explode completely. In an instant, what began as a simple transformation became a ticking time bomb that threatened the entire planet. To prevent Earth destruction, Goku, Trunks, and Pan are forced to travel across the universe to recover the scattered Dragon Balls. This journey becomes known as the Grand Tour, which is where the name Dragon Ball GT originates. Unlike previous arcs in Dragon Ball Z, this section of the story focuses less on constant battles and more on exploration and adventure. The characters travel to strange planets, encounter unusual civilization, and face unpredictable challenges that are varying in tone and intensity. At times, this structure feels like a return to the early Dragon Ball style, where discovery and curiosity were just as important as combat. However, beneath this adventurous tone, there is always an underlying sense of urgency because the destruction of Earth is constantly approaching. Despite the lighter atmosphere, the audience is always aware that failure is not an option. Eventually, the story transitions into a much darker and more focused conflict known as the Baby Saga. This arc introduces one of Dragon Ball GT's most significant antagonists, Baby. Baby is not a traditional conqueror or warrior. Instead, he is a parasitic life form created from the remnants of the Tulif race, a civilization that was destroyed by the Saiyans long ago. Because of this history, Baby's entire existence is driven by revenge against the Saiyan race. However, his method of revenge is not direct destruction. Instead, he spreads by infecting and taking control of other bodies, slowly building his influence across the universe. As Baby gains power, he eventually takes control of Vegeta, one of the most powerful Saiyans alive. This moment leads to the creation of Baby Vegeta, a corrupted version of the Prince of all Saiyans. What makes his transformation especially impactful is not just strength, but its emotional weight. Vegeta, a character defined by pride and independence, is now being used as a vessel by another consciousness entirely. This created a version of Vegeta that is cold, calculating, and far more dangerous than before because he is no longer acting on his own will. He becomes a perfect combination of Saiyan power and truthful hatred. During this conflict, Goku reaches a new transformation that completely redefines his power level within GT, Super Saiyan 4. Unlike previous Super Saiyan forms that rely on divine energy or intense rage, this transformation is rooted in primal Saiyan biology. It represents a return to the original instincts of the Saiyan race, enhanced and refined through extreme training and survival. The appearance of this form immediately shifts to the tone of the series, giving GT a unique identity that separates it from Dragon Ball Z. However, even this new level of power is not enough to permanently solve the conflict, and the story continues to escalate. Following the defeat of Baby, the series moves into Super 17 Saga, which introduces a new artificial threat created through a collaboration between Dr. Gero and Dr. Mayu. Together, they construct Super 17, a being formed from both Earth and Hell, designed to surpass all previous androids. During this arc, Goku becomes trapped in Hell while chaos unfolds on Earth. The remaining Z-Fighters are forced to defend themselves against an opponent who continuously absorbs energy and grows stronger. Even familiar allies struggle to maintain control of the situation, showing how unstable and balanced the power has become. Eventually, with the assistance of Android 17, Goku is able to defeat Super 17, but the victory comes at a cost, including the loss of Krillin, which once again emphasizes the rising stakes of the series. After these conflicts, GT introduces its final and most conceptually important arc, the Shadow Dragon Saga. This arc is built on a single idea that changes everything in the Dragon Ball universe. Every wish made using the Dragon Balls carries an unintended consequence. Over time, the negative energy from those wishes accumulate and eventually take physical forms. The negative energy from all those wishes accumulates and eventually takes a physical form. These manifestations become the Shadow Dragon. Each one represents a corrupted wish from the past. This concept transforms the Dragon Balls from symbols of hope into sources of long-term consequences. At the center of the final conflict is Omega Shenron, the most powerful Shadow Dragon, formed from the complete accumulation of negative energy. Even Goku in Super Saiyan 4 form struggles against this opponent, showing that raw strength alone is no longer enough to resolve the conflict. Vegeta returns and achieves Super Saiyan 4, and together they fuse into Gogeta in an attempt to end the battle quickly. For a brief moment, it seems as though victory is guaranteed. However, the fusion runs out before the fight is completed, leaving the conflict unresolved once again. With no other options remaining, Goku gathers energy from every living being on Earth and beyond to form a final spirit bomb. This attack ultimately destroys Omega Shenron and brings the conflict to an end. After the final battle, the Dragon Balls are no longer usable, and their existence effectively comes to an end. Goku eventually departs alongside Shenron, disappearing for 100 years. The series concludes not with celebration or victory, but with silence and distance. The world moves forward with its greatest protector, and the legacy of the Dragon Balls comes to a quiet but definite close. Whether Dragon Ball GT is considered a successful or a failure ultimately depends on perspective, but one thing cannot be denied. It is a story that dared to end the Dragon Ball saga in its own way, and that alone is why it continues to be discussed and debated even today.